All right. It is 6:30. We'll call the Freetown-Lakeville Regional School Committee to order. Renee, can we do a roll call?
Sure. Steve Owen.
Here.
Jean Fox.
Here.
Sherry Barron. I thought I saw her. She might not be there yet. Bob Clark.
Here.
Laura Ramsden.
Here.
Will Stankowitz.
I'm here. Good evening, everyone.
Steve Sylvia.
Here.
Thank you. Still don't see Sherry. Okay, I don't see Sherry or Jen just yet.
Okay. We do have a quorum, so we can go ahead and get started.
Can you hear me, folks?
Oh, there she is.
Yeah, but I can't get any video. This is what it says.
Sherry, I can see you.
Okay.
So
Good. I can't.
There you go, Sherry. Looks good.
yep.
Okay, I don't see me, but not that I need to.
You look great.
Are we live now?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Okay, I'm on page 4. Is there any way to move me? So I can see all of you?
That I'm not sure, but we should go ahead and proceed.
Ms. Barron, I will move you as soon as I can.
Okay, thank you.
All right. LakeCAM is recording this as well as live streaming this. Anybody else recording the meeting? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on to item 3 on the agenda, which is public participation. Based upon rules outset for a Zoom meeting, anyone that would like to speak during public participation, they must turn their video on as well as unmute themselves and announce their full name as well as town, parent, grandparent, teacher, etc. So I will open up public participation to anyone who'd like to speak.
I'm Paula Mueller. I'm the nurse at Apponequet High School, and I would like to speak.
Go ahead.
I just want to read a letter for everyone that I wrote to the school committee. I did hear back from one member of the school committee, but I just want to read it. It says, "Dear Freetown-Lakeville School Committee members, I'm the school nurse at Apponequet Regional High School, where I have worked since September of 1996 and the school nurse leader for the district. In addition to a master's degree in nursing, I also hold a Bachelor of Science in Biology, so I have a very strong background in science. I'm writing to you to express my grave concerns about the plan to bring back a grade of students full-time at each school on March 8th, 2021. In our school district strategic plan for 2019 to 2022, Pillar 1 is that we will create, and then put in quotes, an inclusive and safe learning environment for all students, unquote. Yet the plan currently is to bring students back into an environment that, according to the US Center for Disease Control, and a chart 9/2020, and I put a link to the chart in there, we are still at high risk for in-school transmission of COVID-19. The community data as of 1/28/21 shows that both towns, Freetown and Lakeville, have positivity rates between 9 and 10%. That puts the community solidly in a higher risk category for in-school transmission on the CDC chart. In both communities, the average daily number of new cases over the last 2 weeks is about 80 per 100,000, again putting both towns in the higher risk for in-school transmission category. This data does not point to it being a good time to bring more students in, and thereby reducing the social distancing between students and increasing the risk of in-school transmission. Bringing students back is a valid goal, but rather than setting an arbitrary date, We should set up data-driven benchmarks using the readily available community data in order to bring the children back to school safely. For example, we could use something like when both towns' positivity rate and new case rate reach the CD's category for lower risk of transmission in school benchmark, that lower risk of transmission in school is quotes because that's from the CDC chart, then bring some classes back. We should do this slowly to see if we start to have any evidence of in-school transmission. As more and more adults in the community get vaccinated, the numbers should go down accordingly. Another consideration that we should keep in mind is that the CDC predicts that by mid-March or early April, the UK variant of SARS-CoV-2 will be the predominant strain in the US. This strain is 50 to 60% more infectious than the strain we're currently dealing with and may or may not be as responsive to the vaccine. Using benchmarks instead of picking an arbitrary date will also help us remain safe despite the influx of this new strain into our communities. Please remember, we are all reluctant pioneers in this. We are attempting to run schools safely in the midst of a global pandemic that has killed more than 400,000 Americans, something that has not been done in over 100 years. Our students, although unlikely to get very sick themselves, do not live in a vacuum. They live with parents and sometimes grandparents that may have multiple pre-existing conditions who could become very ill or die from COVID-19. My concern here is for the entire school community, students, parents, grandparents, teachers, paraprofessionals, secretaries, custodial staff, administrators, and food service workers. And if you know me, as some of you do, you know my concern is genuine, as I have worked very hard over the last 24 years as an advocate for all of these people. And I respectfully submit this letter to you.
Thank you, Ms. Muller. I appreciate it. We did receive your letter earlier, and I did have an opportunity to have a conversation with you as well. I see there are others that have raised their hand, and I'll go down in order. Ms. Steele.
Thank you. So I am Erin Steele. I'm the co-president of the EAFL with Henry DeMello, who is also here. And I just have a brief statement that I'm going to read on behalf of the EAFL. After a 3.5-hour meeting held Thursday, January 28th, in which it was asked to pick between a targeted return date of February 22nd or March 8th, the EFL wishes to announce that it approved the proposal for a targeted return of grades 2, 4, 6, and 12 on March 8th, 2021. The EFL also wishes to emphasize that any return of students should be based on science and safety protocols. The overwhelming sentiment of the membership is that it is preferable that vaccines should be widely administered prior to any return date. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Steele. Appreciate it. Katie?
Hi, Katie Gallagher.
And I'm Pete Gallagher. Both my wife and I are both teachers at the middle school. However, we are choosing to speak today not as educators, but as parents of 3 children in the district. While no model is perfect, we have felt that the hybrid model and the synchronous model in particular has been successful. With small class sizes and 6-foot spacing, we supported what we felt was a safe return to the classroom for our children.
Like many parents, we had to make some really tough decisions this summer. For our special needs daughter who's unable to wear a mask, we felt that a return to school would not be safe, and therefore we made the decision not to send her to kindergarten. For our middle schoolers, when we made the decision to send them to school, at the time COVID cases were much lower and we knew that safety precautions were being implemented in the schools. Despite the rising cases in the community, we've still felt that our children are safe at school. However, with the decision that was made to bring back 6th grade amongst other grades, we no longer feel that way.
We were able to make the choice whether or not to send our children to school at the beginning of the year. Now, mid-school year, the scenario is much different as the cases rise and the spacing of students within the classroom shrink. If the situation back in September, I can't say we would have chosen for our children to return. Now we feel like our only option is to keep our 6th grader in school with larger class sizes, as there is no remote option, and we do not feel it would be in his best interest to have him learn a new school model such as TECA, if that is even an option. We would love to have all 3 of our children in the school in the district, but now is not the time. This model has worked thus far. Let the data show when we can return, not the calendar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to both of you. Ms. Walters, I see you're up next.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm also going to read the letter that I shared with you last evening. I want to write to you as a parent and teacher in this community. And as such, I believe that I can understand and empathize with the many varied opinions, as well as the desire for a full and in-person return to school. I have a high school student of my own, and I would give anything to make COVID just disappear for him, but I cannot. We cannot. As a parent, I'm grateful for the hybrid model that the teachers in our district have successfully implemented so far. My son's teachers and counselors have been proactive, diligent, innovative, and supportive. He and I have depended heavily on them. We are grateful for their dedication. I give my family an A- for social distancing. Not perfect, but we've really tried. At home, when pleading his case to do something social, I often hear my high schooler say, "Why not? I'm in school anyway. I'm with these kids anyway. What's the difference?" I'm concerned that the progressive return to full in person will add merit to this mindset. I teach art at Freetown Elementary School. Within the hybrid model, I've been successful at both keeping proper safety protocol and providing students a semi-typical elementary art experience. The cohort model allowed me the necessary space for students to explore various mediums from paint to oil pastels. I believe that I've been able to provide the types of meaningful experiences that memories are made of. Since the return of K in grade 1 to full in-person, I can say with certainty that the in-person art experience for those full in-person grades have been greatly diminished. I have experimented with the types of projects I could possibly safely facilitate, but the more students in class, the more logistical and safety concerns arise. With classes of 18 to 22, I am left to implement the curriculum in a way which relies more heavily and, quite ironically, on a more teacher-centered and technology-dependent approach. As each grade returns to full in-person prior to necessary safety precautions being lifted, their in-person experience will also be diminished. The data does not, as of yet, support a full and safe return. In fact, the tentative date to return grade 2 was announced on the very first day that grade 1 returned full in person. Quarantines have increased since then, including staff and entire classrooms, leaving an already stretched, depleted, and stressed staff scrambling to cover, fill in, and help where needed, and requiring more spontaneous shifts in delivering instruction to our students. I would argue that more time, observation, and data would have been necessary to determine that this return was both successful and safe before announcing another grade within the same school. With the return of grade 2, FES will be at 7/8 capacity. At the same time that the Lakeville town offices remain closed due to COVID restrictions, Freetown Elementary School will be at 7/8 capacity. I am a visual arts teacher, so I will ask you to take a moment to visualize what that will look like. Please imagine a second grade classroom of 22, 66 feet long for proper distancing, walking down the hall for an outside mask break. Please imagine the great responsibility placed on the teachers to keep these students safe at 3 feet distance all day at all times. I personally will be frantically spraying 22 desks and chairs and then wiping them just in time to greet the next class in order to keep my students safe. Like every teacher in this district, I have met every challenge that COVID has delivered to me professionally. I have adapted and redesigned my in-person curriculum for September when I pushed my cart into the classrooms, and every time the cohorts have changed since then. I have spent countless hours at home creating virtual lessons with video and voice, taught myself how to use and manage Google Classroom, learned how to create engaging slideshows to implement my in-person lessons, strategized and re-strategized how to effectively deliver in-person instruction, as well as creating an expansive virtual Bitmoji classroom to try to make it all more fun and accessible for my students. I've worked hard. I'm very proud of
I think we've lost Bridget. I'm sorry.
Bridget, can you still hear us? we did receive your letter, and thank you for your input and your feedback. I see, Stacy, you are up next.
Hello. I had some thoughts that I wrote down that I would like to read if I could.
Please go ahead.
My name's Steele Lorenko. I'm a first grade teacher at Freetown Elementary. So I have the kids back full time. I'm writing to express my concerns with the plan regarding more students returning to full in-person instruction on March 8th. As I said, I'm a first grade teacher at Freetown, and our classes have already returned to full-time instruction as of January 19th. While having all the students return to full in-person instruction is everyone's hope and wish, I do not believe that now, with the cases of the virus at all-time highs in our communities, is the time to bring even more students into classrooms. It has been 2 weeks since first grade's full return, so I would just like to share a little bit about the experience with that. My colleagues and I want to be there for our students as much as we possibly can, and we work tirelessly to create safe and engaging learning environments for them. The hybrid model allowed us to have quality, safe learning time with a smaller number of students and create connections and build on knowledge and skills. With full classrooms and the safety restrictions and guidelines that are necessary due to COVID-19, students are losing more individual and differentiated attention. A shortage of substitutes when staff is out means a member of our team is pulled for coverage. And again, the most at-risk students are losing out on that additional support and intervention that they need. Academic teaching and learning time continues to be depleted with full classrooms due to all of the minutes washing hands individually multiple times throughout the day, having to physically leave the classroom to simply eat snack, classes being split to eat their lunches, calling students one at a time to do everything from wash hands to retrieve and return computers, pass in work, get in line when exiting the classroom, and so on. Students at this young age do not fully grasp the importance of distancing, no matter how much we encourage, demonstrate, and emphasize it, even when they're doing the best that they can. Mask wearing is another concern. A number of students in each classroom continue to wear masks incorrectly for a majority of the day. Whether due to fit or improper mask etiquette and habits, it hangs below their nose and sometimes is stretched down by their chin. Even when provided with an alternate disposable mask, these problems persist. Students are very fortunate to be able to leave the classroom for part of their day and participate in specialist classes. This transition has become a challenge in lines which span nearly 60 feet or more in the hallways. To then move into a hallway waiting space, which is only, I would say, about 40 feet in length. I'm not positive on that. The considerable size differences between the kindergarten and first grade classrooms when compared to the second and third grade classrooms alone is a great concern when it comes to following the proper spacing guidelines. First grade is fortunate that student desks are able to be placed 3 feet apart. I am concerned for the other grades with even larger class sizes in some cases having this ability. A large majority of staff in the union voted that the hybrid model would be best to maintain because quality teaching and learning was able to happen in a consistently socially distanced and safe environment. Doubling the students in the classroom has taken time from teaching and learning and increased the risk for illness. We all want our students back with us. The best part of teaching is the kids. We all know that. I think that this needs to happen at the right time with the proper plans to make it as safe as possible. Thank you for listening to my thoughts and concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Lorenko. Mr. Palino.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. My name is Michael Palino. I'm a 7th year chemistry teacher at ARHS. I hold a BA in chemistry with a minor in secondary ed, and I'm currently working on my Master's of Arts in Teaching on Physical Science. I have decided to speak tonight because I am deeply troubled by the plan to return more students to full-time in-person learning. As a scientist and an educator, I believe it is crucial that we make evidence-based and data-driven decisions when it comes to the health and safety of our community and our schools. If we look at the COVID data for the state, we will see that it is not where it should be to be considering these changes. On our opening day, September 15th, the 7-day case average in the Commonwealth was about 350. From then on, the 7-day average went through a slow and steady increase until it plateaued just before Thanksgiving at around 2,500 cases per day. We then had the holiday season spike, which had a peak of nearly 6,500 cases per day. We still haven't come down completely from those pre-holiday numbers. As of yesterday, February 2nd, the 7-day average was at 3,200 cases. I'd like you to think about that for a moment. Our current 7-day average is nearly 10 times greater than it was on the day we welcomed students back into the building, and about 30% higher than it was at the early peaks during April and May. Our current community numbers are far greater than they were in the summer months when the hybrid plan was being decided and implemented. Next, we should take a look at what is going on in our schools. Why is the data so good for our schools? Why are we not having transmission? Why are we not having massive spikes within the buildings? I would say that it is because of the protocols that we currently have in place. Students being kept at 6 feet distances, mask requirements, quarantines, and so many others directly correlate to the low infection rates within the school community and why we aren't seeing in-school transmission. If you remove any one of these protocols, especially the social distancing, which will happen when you bring these grades back into school on a full-time basis, you will greatly increase the risk to students and staff in the building. In some cases, classrooms will be filled with 25 to 35 students, rendering it impossible to maintain a 6-foot distance between the students. The CDC still recommends 6 feet between people with masks for those who are not members of the same household. The data is solid on these protocols being the best way to reduce the spread of this deadly and damaging virus. I can only assume that the plan would be to eventually have all grades return to full in-person learning. If that were to happen, I would have no choice as a chemistry teacher but to eliminate any possible lab activities from my lessons. It would be unsafe for me to have more than 9 students in the lab area at any one time, as that would mean there would be considerably less than 6 feet between the students and make it extremely difficult for me to safely supervise those students. If we maintain a hybrid model, I can at least contemplate having students perform hands-on activities in our lab space for some of the most interesting and skill-building labs that I have available in my repertoire for the second half of the year. As a teacher, I want nothing more than to have all of my students back in front of me. Synchronous hybrid teaching is exhausting. It would be so much easier to return to the tried and true methods of instruction that I've developed over the last 7 years. But even if the students return in full, those methods won't be used. Students won't be pulling desks together to work in small groups. They won't be jumping into the lab to determine how stoichiometry works to determine the relationships between the properties of gases. They won't be developing a plan to determine the acidity of common household products and foodstuffs. They will still be sitting at their desks as far apart as possible with their masks on, working mostly individually and trying their best to process and learn the concepts and material of a high school chemistry course. I know we want life in school to go back to normal. I know there are students who are struggling with the hybrid model. I know there are staff who are struggling with the hybrid model, but it is the safest option available. When I voted to choose the March 8th return date, that was not an endorsement for me as it being the safest option. Neither return date was a safe option. The best choice for the health and safety of our students, our staff, and our communities is to continue in the hybrid model for at least the foreseeable future, if not the remainder of the school year. As Mrs. Mueller said, it is crucial that we pay attention to what is going to happen with these new strains, these new variants. We cannot ignore the data. We have to keep everyone's best interests in mind here. I want to stay safe. I want to stay healthy. I do not want to increase my risk to continue to do the job that I love to do. All it will take is one student or one staff member to be hospitalized or worse for our world to be shattered. Will it really be worth it when we lose a member of our school community? I implore you to do the right thing. When the time comes, please vote to remain in the hybrid model and put a stop to this plan to return more students to full in-person. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Mr. Palino, thank you very much for your input. Ms. Lombard.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Lombard. I'm one of the counselors over at Apponequet High School. The counselors at Apponequet had also sent a letter, which Mr. Owen did acknowledge that he received, that we would like to read tonight. I am writing this letter on behalf of the Apponequet School Counseling Department to express our concerns over the plan for students to return full-time to our district schools on March 8th. While we understand that the union voted for this date, you should know it is because we felt there were no safe options presented to us. It is important that you all know and understand the passion of a school counselor lies in finding ways for students to meet with success academically, socially, and emotionally. This past year has been extremely difficult for all of our students, and we feel it every day. However, the solution cannot be to wave a magic wand and pretend coronavirus is not a reality, to pretend that the virus can't spread in the schools. Unfortunately, the virus really does not care about our emotions. It does not care that we want nothing more than to see our students every day. Our only defense against this monster is to continue keeping the safety parameters we currently have in place. That is how we defeat this and return to normal one day. Hybrid learning is far from perfect. It is a tremendous amount of work for the school staff and the students. We see them, we hear them. We know that they are all tired and ready for normalcy. The overwhelming majority of staff and many families are willing to sacrifice their time and continue to do the extra work if it means keeping ourselves, our students, and the Freetown-Lakeville community safe. This means maintaining a hybrid schedule. We are not against a full return. We want a full return. However, we do not want to sacrifice the safety of our students and ourselves to make this happen. When data shows that it is safe to return, I can assure you that we will all be cheering and banging our drums to make that happen. The time has not yet come, and patience is not the path to success. We plead that you listen with an open mind to what our staff has to say. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Lombard. Ms. Lamb.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my name is Stephanie Lamb. I am a second grade teacher at Freetown Elementary School. And I am in agreement with most of all that's been said tonight. I have not been in favor of full in-person. We are, as you know, we are K full in-person and first grade, and our numbers in COVID have increased since the full in-person model has taken place at those grade levels. And our classrooms, as you've heard from Ms. Lorenko, second and third grade is smaller than the K and 1 classrooms. And our numbers will be 22 and 23 students in a confined space. So you can imagine what that might look like. We have made great success, I believe, with the hybrid model. We've been able to make students safe. We've been able to give them the increased attention that they need during this time. And we've also been able to teach them in the best way possible because we've had the extra time and the smaller sizes. Of course, when that's doubled to, for myself, 22 students, now we have all of the safety protocols that will still be in place, now doubled. So hand washing routines take an awful long time. As you've also heard, the lines will be over 60 feet long when you're taking students to their specialists or to the bathroom or what have you. And I don't believe that it's in the best interest of their safety with what we have to deal with at this time. I also don't think with more students coming back that they will have an increase in learning, because I think we're compromising that as well. Or we will not be able to do as much as what we've been doing now, and we've been very successful. I'm happy to see how much the students are learning in my classroom and the fact that I know I've kept them safe and that our staff has been safe as well. So for all those reasons, I am not in favor of the full in-person return of schools at this students at this time. I don't believe it's safe, and I don't think it's in the best interest of their education. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your feedback, Ms. Lamb. Ms. Lima.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to read off of my letter that I wrote tonight. So, good evening and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Delima and I am a visual arts teacher at the high school. Like my other colleagues, I felt the need to speak this evening to draw attention to some of the concerns that a majority of the teachers and staff in this district have with the plans to begin returning additional specified grades in full. Before I touch upon my points, I would first like to recognize the amazing work that my fellow teachers, paras, specialists, and all other staff members are doing this year to keep this machine running. We have been asked to be flexible this year. I think we have, without a doubt, demonstrated the dexterity of our minds and bodies with the restructuring that has occurred in our schools. We have been so flexible this year that I would argue we could even start our very own Circus Soleil show right here in Freetown-Lakeville. And seeing as we have been so flexible day in and day out in our classrooms with our students, with our various cohorts, and with all the new guidelines, I would simply ask that you truly consider the concerns that myself and my colleagues continue to voice this evening. If some of these arguments are redundant of previous letters this evening, I do apologize, but I think that is also a reflection of the teacher and staff collective. We want to make sure we are being heard. I have organized my thoughts, concerns, and questions in a brief numbered list. Hopefully some of these topics might be resolved throughout the meeting. 1, how is the return of full grade levels going to affect the class size to room ratio in terms of our 6-foot social distancing mandate? A majority of us do not support social scaling back to a 3-foot distance, but that is what will most likely need to be done in many classrooms across the district. This is a prominent concern for our students and our own health, not to mention it seems to pose some logistical nightmares. I'll add that Nurse Mueller's letter to the school committee included data-specific suggestions to when a full return might be more safely considered, and I'd highly recommend heeding her call. 2, quarantining disruption. There is still quite a steady amount of required quarantining taking place due to close contact. If we are steadily quarantining now with a 6-foot mandate, isn't it logical to say that the number of close contacts will only increase once more students are filling our classrooms and cafeterias? Health being a reason to push for a more full return. The students need more normalcy. They need to socialize. While I of course agree that mental health is a priority, I fear that once we have more students in person, the rate of quarantining will rise, thus causing those students to be more isolated than they already are in the hybrid setting. When they're quarantined, it adds more inconsistency to teaching, learning, socializing, etc., thus defeating your reasoning for one of your reasonings for full in-person return anyways. Some of my students that were quarantined, I didn't see in person for over a month due to the way the scheduling and vacation time fell. I would also like to add that I think we do a tremendous job in this district in general, addressing mental health and whether we are in a pandemic or not. 3, hybrid is tough. It has been incredibly challenging to restructure an entire teaching pedagogy to keep students on track and catch them up if they've missed classes or been remote for certain reasons, to teach 2 groups at once, one on a computer, one in person. I'm speaking from the perspective of an art teacher. Each of us has our own unique challenges pertaining to our subject. Mine being providing individual materials to each student and figuring out how to demonstrate effectively to 2 separate cohorts, one on a screen and one in person, without being able to get up close and actually physically help them. I could go on and on about the challenges of a hybrid setting, but my point here is to emphasize that we are asking to stay in that hybrid mode for the safety of our students and colleagues and families. Despite the challenges, despite how difficult it is, despite how draining it is, we still get up and we come to school and we do it. We think this is the best and safest way to deliver education to our students. Hybrid is working. The protocols are working. Let's stick with it. In closing, I just want to stress how much I do truly love my job. I'm involved in other additional activities that go along with my job, running clubs, still doing those virtually. I truly, truly care for my students and their holistic well-being, as well as my colleagues and my coworkers. And I implore you to consider the concerns of the majority of our teachers and staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your feedback, Ms. Lena. Anybody else like to raise their hand to speak for public participation? Just go through the list, make sure that I'm not missing anybody here.
Mr. Owen, I would like to speak if I may. This is Maureen Jones.
Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. You can hear me okay?
I can. Thank you.
Okay, you're very welcome. I know I already sent a copy of this letter to Mr. Medeiros and the school committee. Mr. Owen, I want to thank you for acknowledging that. There are a few things I've been thinking about since your last meeting, and I feel are important to discuss in a public forum. At the last school committee meeting, reactions to the daily COVID notifications being sent from the central office were referred to as white noise. I feel this description is not an accurate reflection of the serious concern that staff members have for the continued safety of all students and for ourselves as we move forward to sending students back on March 8th in grades 2, 4, 6, and 12 to full-time instruction. These concerns, which I'm sure at least some parents share, should not be minimized or dismissed. While I understand the importance of bringing back students full-time, it is imperative that all voices are heard and respected while developing plans to do so. At this point in time, it is very unclear in which direction the pandemic will move, and I hope that our district's plans will be flexible should circumstances worsen in the future rather than improve. In planning for this next phase, I have 2 questions and a request. Question 1, Mr. Medeiros, would you please clarify for parents and staff what type of learning will be accessible for students that must stay home due to sickness or quarantine? How will lessons be delivered to students at home? Currently, there are 20 students quarantined at the middle school. My understanding is that beginning in March, homebound students will only have access to Google Classroom postings, but not live instruction. Will full in-person classes no longer be using the Google Meets platform to reach all students? This scenario seems challenging for students and teachers alike. Question 2, what thresholds will be used for community spread, district spread, or school spread of the virus to determine a school's closing beginning in March? To many, it has become unclear what exactly would initiate a school closing. Perhaps a public review of the conditions that are examined when making the decision to keep a school open or closed would be helpful to all parents and staff at this point in time. Finally, my request is this. I'd like you to consider changes to the district's COVID dashboard. Once March 8th arrives, we will have 2 very different conditions in classrooms. If I may say so, one will be more safe with a 6-foot distance in place between students, and one will be less safe with a distance of 3 feet between students. My understanding is this 3-foot distance will not be measured from desk to desk, but rather from chair to chair. With this new set of circumstances, I would like to request that information on the district COVID dashboard be made more specific by listing the number of virus cases and quarantines in each school per grade. It will be important for the community and staff to have timely information about active cases and quarantine numbers, not only by school, but by grade, in order to understand the effects, if any, of doubling classroom populations in March. In closing, I hope that all committee members will take the time to visit our schools in order to familiarize themselves with these 2 very different learning environments after they are in place. Thank you for your time and consideration of these matters.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Yes, we did get your email. I believe the superintendent has also do the questions that will be part of the plan report later, and we can take a look at the request there. As far as the invite to the schools, I know a number of us.
Mr. Chairman, we've lost your audio.
Can you hear me now?
Very faintly.
Thank you for your feedback. We welcome the opportunity to talk to you.
Mr. Owen, we are having challenges in hearing you clearly.
Okay. Anybody else for public participation? All right. Seeing none, we will go on to the acceptance of minutes from January 20th. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Seeing no more participants for public participation, we'll move on to item number 4, acceptance of minutes from January 20th.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
Any discussion by the committee? All right.
Well,
We'll do a roll call.
Steve Owen,
Yes.
Jean Fox,
Yes.
Jerry Barron, can't find her.
Sorry, yes.
Okay. Jennifer Blum,
Yes.
Bob Clark, Laura Ramsden,
Yes.
Will Sankowitz,
Yes.
Steve Sylvia.
Yes.
Thank you.
The motion passes. Moving on to item 5 in the agenda, FY22 budget presentation.
Mr. Owen, thank you. I'll be sharing my screen just momentarily. I have a 15-minute presentation. Considering the amount of time that was taken and certainly some of the hot topics today, I'll try to keep it somewhat brief with a remote fashion. We'll certainly have this presentation on the website. Give me 1 second. Thank you. Ray, you just might want to mute in 1 minute. So certainly FY22 budget presentation, which kicks off the budget year. We certainly have had a unique year, and I certainly thank the school committee as we start this process working with towns as they're listed. Mr. Owen is the chair, Jean Fox is the co-chair, and all of the members of the school committee. In addition, I'd like to recognize all of the administrative team, both at central office and at the schools. Renee, if you can mute, please. Thanks. The mission statement of the school district reads as, we're committed to providing each student a high quality, relevant education that promotes academic success, well-being, and responsible citizens. We clearly are raising the bar. We have added to our raise the bar strategy this year, respect, patience, and flexibility as we've taken on all of our challenges. It's important that in all our decision-making, our students remain our #1 priority. We've created a great school system here, but we need to continue providing that excellence as we move into the 22 budget 22 year. Some significant assumptions to make this year. This is a standard slide, but it's critically important that folks take a look at the assumptions built into the start of the budget process for us for next year. State aid is being maintained with an increased $30 amount or an $81,450. That's one assumption we're expecting from the governor's budget. In addition, regional transportation is slightly increasing for next year projected. Circuit break, however, is being reduced, so as you can almost see a wash there. Negotiations are in process for all contractual obligations to the collective bargaining groups. We're projecting a very optimistic health insurance level funded prediction. We feel it's a conservative number, so that will certainly be an assumption we take into account as you look at the upcoming numbers. Utility costs are trending upward. However, they've been offset by our projected savings from energy improvements in the first year of the lease of performance contract. So we're very excited about that ability. Again, the funding amounts to be adjusted as the Commonwealth releases future updates, but this is the start of the budget process with the towns leading up to town meetings. So the detail, the numbers behind what to expect for next year as we start this budget process. The recommended budget by the superintendent is $42,633,047. Last year's voted budget was $40,854,813. You can see the 1.7 increase or 4.3.5% increase for the coming year, FY22. Towns, finance, regional FinCom, they typically look at the assessment, what it's going to cost them as it relates to after receiving state revenue. And you can see the increases there. Freetown would see an increase of $861,000, $784, a 7.22% increase in their assessment. Lakeville would see a 6.3% increase, $965,000. It's going to be a real capacity issue as we look to what revenue is coming into the towns under what has been extremely challenging FY21 year and we'll continue to monitor that. But those are the numbers behind what the budget looks like. I'm going to show some subsequent slides which go into a little bit more of the detail, but again, trying to keep my presentation to about 15 minutes to kickstart. There'll be some detailed books provided to all the stakeholders, and certainly we'll provide this PowerPoint on the website and through the Superintendent's Corner this week. So looking at that breakdown that I said, that 4.35% increase, that $1,778,234 increase, you can see the breakdown. Salaries percentage increase 2.38. Make some assumptions there, and we'll go into some of those details. Again, I won't read through the entire slide for you, considering some of the topics that we'll be covering later tonight, but this does give the breakdown and where the significance is. Certainly our organization's backbone is our staff, and certainly we need to continue to fund that and provide the appropriate resources for that. Historically, this budget presentation that I'm presenting tonight falls well within the range of the last 5 years, because you can see in FY20, the voted number was actually 4.61%, slightly higher than this initial budget increase. But the last few years, we've also tried to be fiscally responsible and conservative, and we've been able to make some adjustments based on revenues coming in and also what the state has done. 2.2% increase, 2.2, 2.56. As I said, this budget tonight starts the budget process working with the towns as we move forward to work with Freetown and Lakeville, both structurally and collectively, to provide a sound education in what is obviously extremely challenging fiscal times. The employee salaries, just to give a little breakdown to that. So when you look at that dollar amount, it's a $24 million. So it's a huge chunk of the $42 million budget. The increase of $974,000 includes step and schedule increases, some assumptions relative to collecting and bargaining underway, which is well underway with some groups and just starting with others. Anticipated retirements, the increase of the minimum wage, which has already taken effect for this year. It does add a computer science teacher relative to the program, long overdue for the middle school. It does have a part-time monitor included in that, a part-time administrative assistant at the intermediate school, a part-time kindergarten paraprofessional to provide some equity issues as it relates to AES compared to FES, and a school psychologist, which is really a drive of moving some money away from contracted services to a position that we feel will provide the necessary services for our children. That's the salary breakdown, the big ticket item that certainly drives a lot of our budget numbers for this year. Some background information that was referenced in the assumptions. We are anticipating level funded for health insurance. We went out to bid and we'll be receiving some quotes as it relates to providing the same quality of health insurance for both our employees, retirees, and the choice of coverage. As you can see in the past, that's been a significant number that has impacted our budget. This is a conservative number, and we feel very comfortable as we start the budget process that we'll be able to provide that quality of service at the same cost for next year as an assumption for health insurance. Transportation numbers, both special education and regular education, are slightly increased. If you look at the slide on the regular ed, we're adding one bus, but we had reduced two a couple of years ago, and we just feel based on the needs of our children that we do need to have one additional bus built in. And we actually had two buses built in this year to address some of the COVID situations. But hopefully as we turn to some normalcy, we feel confident that through the bid process and transportation, we can do that with regular education transportation. Special education transportation's up slightly. That includes in district, out of district, and McKinney-Vento homeless students as well. Again, a significant number. So what I've tried to do tonight, and as I said, in about a 15-minute time frame, is start the process for the school committee, which usually gives me an uninterrupted presentation as they're doing tonight. And then we certainly roll up our sleeves and start to look at the detail behind all these numbers. But it's important for the community to see that we're starting that process in a timely fashion as it relates to coming up to town meeting, which is a little bit earlier in Lakeville, projected to be May 10th and then early June for Freetown. Capital debt is going down. So we still have some things off, but we paid off the athletic facilities. It still includes the pool, the track, the tennis courts, and the intermediate school and middle school. So capital debt is actually down once again, a reduction from the previous year based on having paid off some of the bands. Special education costs. This is a breakdown based on what the general fund is. In other words, what we're building into our operational budget and what we can anticipate getting from grants, for preschool grants and circuit breaker from the state. those kind of numbers drive that big piece. And obviously it's a large chunk of a much needy population as it relates to services for students, and certainly always has an impact and is subject to state funding moving forward, but something we need to monitor and very volatile and under normal circumstances. And certainly I think we could all attest this is far from being normal year. And as we roll into FY22. Special education enrollment numbers. These are the numbers as projected through 18, 19, 20, and 21. But as most of us probably well know, we're anticipating some increases in those numbers and services based on gaps and things that have happened this past year, not only in our district, but throughout the nation. We do have a promising slide here. When you look at the last 5 years, the fact that our savings account or an excess deficiency account, which is a rainy day fund in relation to one-time needs, and certainly we may be in that situation this year with a pandemic, is at all-time high and right up to where we need it to be in relation to addressing some of the gaps that may exist in our operational budget moving forward. The FY21 certified number is $1.5 million, as you can see there. And as you can see, the school committee has worked extremely hard to make sure that the quality of programs and services are there. And we haven't been able to compromise that, but just by efficiency and doing things a little bit better, we've been able to bring back what were those amounts that went through FY13, 14, 15, and 16. So our E&D puts us in a very good situation moving forward for the regional school district. The district enrollment is down, similar to the Commonwealth, right? We have about over 100 students in homeschooling, which is double the number this year based on COVID and the pandemic. So what would normally be a flatlined enrollment of about 2,800 students is down. The real hard question, and the question that begs to be offered by all administrators, is what do our numbers look like next year? Do we anticipate with some normalcy bringing more of our full remote students back and homeschooled students back? We have to be very cautious with our school choice revenue and acceptance of students based on the fact that the volatility of anywhere between 100 and 150 students can change dramatically. But as you can see, the historical enrollment was dramatically impacted this year when we have 100 fewer students that are registered students with the school district. The breakdown by town, similarly across the board, it really doesn't deviate much from either Freetown and or Lakeville in relation to that declining enrollment. School choice, as I referenced earlier, started out with 33 students. We're now up to 63 students. We're going to have to be extremely conservative. We'll take that vote, or the school committee will take that annual vote, which I'll recommend once again that we remain a school choice district, but we're going to have to be real careful about setting up the parameters as to how many students that we can safely anticipate accepting based on the fact that we'll have some real tough decisions relative to grade level in schools, not knowing what the numbers are for students returning to us for the fall. And again, next steps in the process and timeline. I think I'm adhering to my 15-minute time frame, Chairperson Owen. The recommended budget is $42,633,047. Last year's voted budget, after all was said and done in Freetown and Lakeville, was $40,854,813. I am requesting and presenting to you tonight an increase of $1,778,234, a 4.35% increase from the FY21 voted budget. Upcoming meetings, critical meetings, as we really streamline the process, moving up to a town meeting almost a month earlier than we've had in the past. We will schedule a regional FinCom meeting next Wednesday, most likely a remote meeting, although it's my understanding that the governor may be lifting some of those restrictions as it relates to public events on February 8th. We do have upcoming school committee meetings on February 24th, March 10th, March 17th, and March 24th will be the public hearing. I'll make a recommendation at that time. The budget will be voted on, and then we send that information on to the towns. But we're going to work closely with all the stakeholders to certainly not compromise our program and our level of services. Last but not least, it is to raise the bar on the district. We have done a tremendous job this year under extremely challenging circumstances. As I said to a few folks in my office this morning, if it was easy, everybody'd be doing it. It's not easy, and I continue to be optimistic based on all the support that we have received here by both towns that we can present a budget next year that will meet the needs of our children moving forward. Mr. Owen, thank you for that uninterrupted initial budget kickoff for FY22.
I appreciate it. Thank you. I will open it up to any initial questions by the committee.
Mr. Owen, if there are, in the absence, I don't mean to interrupt, you typically school committee members like to get their full detailed booklets and packets before they start asking questions. So it's not atypical that questions happen. I would be completely remiss as I see the camera rolling to not recognize the Director of Finance specifically for all her hard work and efforts, and my administrative assistant who's also there on the screen, probably reluctantly on the screen, but for all their hard work and effort to really do all the heavy work as it relates to my presentation tonight. I did say to Kara, and I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but I said, listen, if I make a mistake in one of those numbers, you can interrupt me or you can wait till the end. And I didn't get interruptions, so I think I adhered to the script for the most part. Is that accurate, Kara? So
Yes,
thanks,
you did.
Mr. Owen, for that opportunity. Thank you. That's for that opportunity. But again, school committee members, we have some work ahead of us, right? We have some work ahead of us, and I know Mr. Owen will speak to that with Regional FinCom. I know the towns are in some real challenging times, and we're going to have to be fiscally conservative and responsible as it relates to meeting the needs of our kids. And I think we can do so with this starting point. Thank you.
Thank you. I know there'll be many more questions once we get at least one of my favorite books, the budget book. But one last time, I'll open it up to anybody in the initial questions from the committee. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 6 in the agenda, old business, 6A, FY21 budget.
Good evening. Included in the school committee's packet is the general fund overview for FY21 year to date through January 27th, 2021. The revenues of $21.5 million and expenditures of $18.7 million, reasonable compared to the prior year at this time. We will continue to monitor closely the results of operations compared to the budget. As far as the assessment sheet, there are no current revenue source updates to the assessment sheet from the last meeting. In relation to COVID expenditures, we are still waiting on formal confirmation from our member towns, Freetown and Lakeville, to confirm how much more available additional aid they can assist us with for the spring. Lakeville may have additional funds to assist us, and it's possible that Freetown may also have additional funds. The towns are still exploring this possibility and recognize that we do have eligible expenditures and a need. Also, in relation to our COVID expenditures, we were just notified officially that through state appropriation 7061-0027, the State Coronavirus Prevention Fund program, we will have additional funding of $114,875 based on $25 per pupil for foundation enrollment, plus $75 per low-income student, 2 payments to be received in FY21. Eligible uses for these funds include personal protective equipment, hygiene supplies, costs associated with socially distanced on-site learning, remote learning or hybrid approaches, and costs to ensure that low-income or other vulnerable students receive equal access for educational opportunities. As you can see, the uses of these funds are pretty flexible. This funding will certainly assist us with the springtime costs provided for in the COVID summary 8A. This funding source will be added to future COVID summaries. And that concludes my FY21 update.
Any questions by the committee on FY21? Okay, seeing none, FY22.
Tonight's budget presentation involved the efforts of many school district stakeholders and focused on a model that continues to raise the bar for our district students. The preliminary budget that was presented will likely need some future adjustments as we are still awaiting refined estimates on Chapter 70, 71 transportation funding, RFPs for both health insurance and transportation, which could significantly affect the budget estimates. One major recent change that will likely affect the assessments to the towns included in tonight's presentation is related to the district's federal ESSER Round 2 funding, where the district has access to apply for funding of $950,000 toward coronavirus-related expenses, supporting schools in-person, remote, or hybrid models. There is a provision in the House 1 budget that allows member towns to receive up to 75% of this $950,000 or $713,000 of this funding toward their increase in their required minimum contribution. This would mean a potential reduction of $316,000 for Freetown and $333,000 for Lakeville. It would bring Freetown's increased assessment from 7.22% to 4.27%, and it would bring Lakeville's from 6.30% to 3.88%. It is an important consideration to note that if the towns opt to use these funds toward their assessment, it creates a structural funding gap the following year, as part of this budget would be funded from one-time revenues. And also just wanted to note that the plan budget calendar is also provided in the school committee materials, which was also in the presentation. That concludes my FY22 budget update for tonight.
Any questions by the committee on FY22?
Mr. Owen, I know you're going to mention the regional FinCom a little bit later on under reports, so that certainly will be highlighted as we move forward as well.
That's correct.
I had a quick question. What were the two RFPs, transportation and what?
Health insurance.
Oh, that's right. Thank you.
Sure.
Obviously, the big concern with FY22 is the financial situations across the board, but I think there's a big unknown is any special education impact as a result of what has transpired. And was circuit breaker fully used this year, or do we have a balance?
We are anticipating having this current year's revenues rolling into the fund balance, so that would be about 400,000 available for next year, plus what we budget for this year in FY20.
Thank you. Any other questions by the members? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move over to old business item 6C, athletic user fees 2021, vote required.
Included in your packet is a summary of the funding the district would need to cover if the user fees were adjusted in 3 different scenarios that are presented. The first scenario would be a cost of $0 to families for user fees, which would cost the district approximately $130,000. The second column shows a flat user fee of $100, which would cost the district about $81,000. And the third column shows a flat user fee of $200, which would cost the district ultimately $33,000. I would like to ask the committee to deliberate on these options put forth, and we are requesting a vote as a one-time fee reduction. They would serve a great benefit to the families with student athletes. It has been confirmed that there is no available fund balance from the athletics revolving fund to cover these planned costs. As stated earlier, the district's opening E&D balance is $1,586,194 from FY20. Given that we are about half a year into this fiscal year, and we are in a year of potential volatility with the pandemic, it is too early to determine if funds would be available from this year's operating budget to offset this, or if we would need to utilize our well-established E&D fund position. I would ask that we consider later determining the funding source due to these variables. Are there any specific questions?
So Kara did a nice job of that, Mr. Owen, if I may, just to clarify. So what we're recommending tonight is action be taken on the waiver. We do not need to take action on the source. We'll take a look at that operationally at the budget as we get a little later in the year to see where we need to get those funds. We have several options, as Kara's kind of pointed out, but the primary focus of the committee tonight would be to take action as it relates to the 2021 waiver of fees for this year.
I will, before we get into discussion, I'll entertain a motion based upon the recommendation to waive the fees for this year.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. I'll open the floor for discussion. Ms. Barron.
I'm sure that I speak for everyone. I'm delighted that we've been able to do this. We can find a way, Kara can find a way, and that we can help our families out a little during this unusual circumstance.
Maybe Mr. Sienkiewicz.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to the administration for kind of crunching those numbers. I know we threw that on your laps at the last meeting. I just want to confirm and just make sure that waiver fee does include any of the students that are participating in sports in other districts as well.
Yes, that's correct. It includes 2 ice hockey girls players at, I believe, Old Rochester, and also 3 wrestling players for wrestling at Middleborough.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
So, Mr. Sakowitz, if I may, Mr. Clegg, just want to repeat. So Kara's absolutely correct, Will. In some instances where fees were collected there, those families would be reimbursed pending the vote. So we'll address it that way.
Thanks, Rick.
And just to reiterate, this is a one-time current year component.
I see Mr. Clark had his hand.
Mr. Clark, you had a question, comment.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
We can, sir.
I mean, I'll support that waiver, but I would like to look at that user fee again in the future. I've been thinking a lot about this, and sports is such an integral part of the education that we provide our students. It's so much education that occurs outside of the classroom, lifelong lessons that are I don't know the word I'm thinking of, that students learn on the football field, on the courts, on the track. So many things that they not necessarily learn in the classroom: sportsmanship, leadership, how to lose gracefully, so many lifelong lessons that are learned outside of the classroom that they learn in sports. And I'm not happy with user fees at all. And like I said at the last meeting, I can remember the time when there were no user fees. So I would support no user fees this year, but at the same time, I would like to look at this again next year. I think Mark Twain said, I never let schooling interfere with my education. And I think this falls in line with that. So I would definitely like to look at it again when the time is right.
We can do that, Mr. Clark. Anything else on the waiver for this year? Okay. Renee, can we do a roll call vote?
Sure. Steve Owen,
Yes.
Jean Fox,
Yes.
Jerry Barron,
Yes.
Jen Blum,
Yes.
Bob Clark,
Yes.
Laura Ramsden,
Yes.
Will Sankowitz,
Yes.
Steve Sylvia.
Yes.
Thank you.
Moving on to new business 7A, COVID-19 timeline plan report.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. As a placeholder, we've kept the COVID timeline and report. Actually, I added the term timeline, and I think it's important to recognize that. I have multiple items and documents that I've shared with the school committee, and I'll go into some detail tonight. I've heard from a variety of individuals, everything from waving a magic wand to impatience to kind of impulsive decisions. And I think everything that this district has done has been 24/7, 365 days since March, right? And maybe before that in relation to this plan and model. We're going to be updating the COVID timeline. These were not hunches. These were not quick judgments. We're 33 days away from the next target date as it relates to this piece. We heard loud and clear, school committee members, a couple of months ago, that the community felt that we need to see some established timeline as it relates to what we could anticipate in the future. And we provided a timeline. And it's just that. It's a flexible, patient, respectful timeline that meets all of the data, everything we need to do moving forward. Overall, we've had tremendous success in our schools with the current model. Many individuals referenced it earlier. But we're in the second semester, and we're moving forward beyond the midpoint of the academic year. 6 months in, 87 days, right, to where we're at for 2021. I've made some recommendations on the calendar as it relates to the hybrid model, expanding that through April 16th for the school vacation, and then we'll have to take a look at May and June. It's been very well calculated. It's taken into account the Board of Health, local and medical professionals, and it has looked at the data. And as I've referenced to this committee on multiple reports for the last 5 months, the town COVID numbers still have us in the red, but for the first time in some time, the positivity rates continue to trend downward in Freetown and Lakeville. I'm cautiously optimistic, waiting for those results, which come out at 5 o'clock on Thursday. School committee members know because they get my report right after that piece. So we are continuing to see a trend downward of positivity statewide, which is below 4, I believe, 3.5% as of tonight for the state of Massachusetts. And so it's certainly an indication, and we're waiting for last week's results, as I said. We're going to continue the process of bringing our students back in person safely. It does involve the use, as DESE and CDC guidance indicated, 3 to 6 foot spacing in most classrooms. Again, the target date, which was finalized, is March 8th. I've heard some people indicate it's an arbitrary date. No, it's a timeline. We need to plan accordingly, safely, efficiently, as it relates to identifying this. And I do want to make some clarification points as it relates to the number of children that are currently in school safely and in how many students are actually coming back over a month away. By the way, I may add 33 days away from today. Our website will continue to display our district dashboard. Take a look at some surrounding communities. Our dashboard is not weekly. It's updated daily as it relates. But I do have some HIPAA concerns relative to the detail behind grade level and students and staff and so forth. So we got to be a little careful about what information we're able to share. But we've had 120 COVID cases. If you do the math over that percentage, I think we've done a tremendous job to date and continue to do, combining our hybrid model with full in-person. And we'll continue to do that. And we'll pivot hourly, daily, and weekly if we need to. Keep in mind, as I said this at multiple meetings to date, the vast majority of individuals who have now embraced the hybrid model were opposed to the hybrid model. And I think to date, I'm happy to say that what's happened has sold some people, and they are in fact believing. This is not easy work. I repeat, it is not easy. If it was easy, other districts would be doing it. It takes a lot of time and effort and energy in relation to our staff, our community. We're asking families, but it's the right thing to do for our kids. The budget is student-centered, as I said to you earlier. These decisions are student-centered. It is based on the safety of our staff and students. But again, our priorities are children. And we're doing a disservice to not look forward at what we can do for our kids moving forward. The nurses continue to use the Abbott antigen test at all the schools for symptomatic students and staff members. We'll continue to broadcast out the community information as it relates to the breakdown. We are not seeing higher numbers staff-wise and student-wise with our full in-person. We've started with our kindergarten students for 2 months now. Our first grade, as was referenced earlier, at both of our elementary schools. And now we're starting to explore full in-person instruction at the other schools. Didn't seem to have that same fanfare when we were bringing back our elementary kids from some individuals, but obviously it's having an impact now at the intermediate school, middle school, and high school. But it's a gradual, safe approach. It's not a wave of the wand. Again, somewhat disturbed the fact that someone would question whether I think the coronavirus exists. Everything about this plan addresses the pandemic, but it meets the needs of our students. And it's a disservice to not look at those kids over the coming months between now and June and be able to do the best we can to provide a quality sense of instruction. I'll speak to a couple of the questions that came up. Our TECA students, 155 students, we saw 40 students come back to us, are still remote and are successful for the second semester. We're pleased with that piece. DESE did approve remote learning snow days, and we witnessed and observed our second day. So we had one in December, we had one on Monday. as it relates to full-time remote. It's just another example that I'm going to err on the side of caution and use safety of our students and staff as a number one priority. In addition, I'd just like to make some other comments, and then I'll certainly open up to the school committee and hopefully address some of the concerns. Vaccine distribution, the town of Lakeville and also the town of Freetown are doing a phenomenal job taking a proactive approach. Having identified a site, they're looking at the 75 and over population as they should, first and foremost, and the 65 population. And then I've already been informed by town officials that the Freetown-Lakeville Regional School District educators will follow those groups. So I have the utmost confidence that if the federal government and state government can supply the doses, the town officials will supply the adequate necessary to meet the needs of our staff and ultimately our community moving forward. But we need to do it with the vaccine distribution based on where the target group should be. So our in-person target date is March 8th, and it was pushed back to address some concerns relative to the February vacation, the semester. It's grades 2, 4, 6, and 12. Let me repeat that again. Grade 2, 4, 6, and 12. Intentionally and strategically identifying one grade that's less than 100 additional students. I'll repeat, less than 100 additional students than currently exists at each of those schools. My leadership team has known about these plans for weeks. Part of the plan was to be sure that we have a secure environment in the cafeteria, in our corridors, in our classrooms. And I have the utmost confidence as principals roll out letters to their families that the detail that Ms. Pinault and Mr. Ward put behind in the elementary schools to K-1 will continue for those other grades. We currently have 1,700 students in 5 of our schools safely receiving in-person instruction in the hybrid model. 1,700 of the 2,700. And I just shared with you that we're going to see about 90 students more per grade, the second cohort coming back in those classes. We will continue to utilize synchronized and asynchronized learning. So the concept that full in-person instruction, remote learning is here to stay, not for the year 2021, but for the future. And we've got to make sure that we're able to incorporate and meet the needs of close contacts and quarantines and students that are not able to be engaged full and in person. Again, I referenced the quote earlier to some of my staff that the ultimate measure of a person is not where they stand in moments of comfort and convenience, but where they stand in times of challenge and controversy, right? I recognize that there's a lot of emotion and anxiety, but anybody who has looked at the detail behind the data-driven, I too was a science teacher, biology teacher as well, so I can relate to that. My wife's in the pharmaceutical field in science, so I can relate to the scientists out there who are concerned that we're not adhering to the numbers. But the data-driven examples that I see are providing us a safe return for our students. I've extended benefits for all the employees in an agreement in relation to addressing their COVID needs moving forward. And this calendar can change daily, weekly, and monthly, just like when we anticipate a storm coming, to address the COVID numbers that are trending downward locally and statewide. The target date is an attempt to make a safe return for the vast majority of our students. We have seen special education students, targeted students, students who have need students come back at all of the schools. I have the utmost confidence that with the support of the community and the towns, that we will do the same in the coming weeks and months as we move forward safely, successfully, as we did in September, and as we move forward. So I'd be happy to answer the school committee questions. I know that took maybe about 10 more minutes, but I was trying to touch upon, Mr. Owen, some of the questions that came up, although most of which were statements or topics as it relates to kind of where we're at. But if school committee feel I missed something, I'd be certainly happy to address it in true transparency.
Thank you, Mr. Medeiros. I'm sure as most of the members, if not all, have received several email, phone calls across the board regardless of where they're. This is not an easy time. This is not an easy decision. So I appreciate your update there. Any of the members have questions or Ms. Fox?
Thank you, Mr. Owen. I have a couple. There were a few of the, well, first of all, this was all staff that gave input tonight. I just want you to know that I'm hearing different things in the community, okay? Families don't necessarily believe that we're not following the science. That's point one. Point two, I was concerned about the problem with getting subs, and I was concerned about, and I mentioned this at a prior meeting, that we bring these kids back, but those who have reason to stay home may not have valid options to continue learning. Those are my issues.
So Mrs. Fox, to the latter piece, I certainly agree with you on the first portion. Certainly we are adhering to the science, and I think there are a lot of families and communities that have communicated that to me as well, and thank us for doing that. I made reference to synchronized and asynchronized learning because where we've returned to full in-person instruction, we need to be fully aware that we may need, whether it be through Google Meet and or the technology, continue to take advantage for students who are unable to attend. What I made clear is that it's not going to be a hybrid. Some can do hybrid, some can do full if we're going back. But what I've made clear to people is that does not preclude us from allowing us to use the same technology that has been very successful and has been referenced, which is allows students who are unable to attend school due to medical issues and of concerns to still tie into their classrooms. As I said, this isn't an FY21 piece. This is the future for education as it relates to our kids. And so to address the needs of the family at the middle school, high school, intermediate, it's going to look a little different at each of the levels. Individual classroom teachers will make some individual determination, but the expectation will be is that we will still be able to provide education for students who may in fact not be able to attend for quarantining, close contacts, those types of things.
Okay, and the subs?
So the substitute issue has been an issue for 31 years as far as I've been in education, right? I mean, this is not, we actually have brought some more folks in with some lenience on certification to help us out in the community. We continue to expand. If we looked at attendance, and a few school board members have asked me, I would say we've had more students out on a flu year than we've had this year. I would say our staff attendance is about the same as we have had as well as it relates. So substitutes in Freetown-Lakeville and everywhere continue to be an issue as it relates to that. We lost a cadre of individuals who were retired teachers who were not comfortable necessarily coming this year, Gene. So that did hurt us because we had a cadre of individuals who were willing to volunteer but weren't totally comfortable with the format this year for obvious reasons and where they fit into from a risk category. So we continue to bring in more substitutes. There is no perfect solution to that. I will interview, and Renee, my administrative assistant, can attest to that. We're turning people around pretty quick, Gene. It is a problem. It has been a problem for some time. And I think will continue to be a problem. But
yeah,
we feel
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't necessarily exacerbated by teachers not being or classrooms being. I mean, let's be clear. The staff are doing such a great job. I have such respect for everybody that I heard tonight. I cannot even express my pride in who we have and their care and concern. Very, very important. But I don't want to dismiss some of these concerns. And that includes the staffing.
Yeah, so our staff cases, if you look at the case breakdown of 120 cases, most of our cases are student cases at the high school level as it relates to different activities and things happening. I can give you that breakdown a little bit further. Renee certainly can attest to this, my administrative assistant on camera there. The first thing I do when I start my morning off, when I get to the office, already started a couple hours earlier, is I get the daily attendance, Gene, and members, and I kind of go through that to be sure that that the principals have everything they need to start their day, and continues to be challenging, but I do not think it's been disruptive to providing the quality education that we can provide for our kids moving forward.
Thank you.
Steve, we can't hear you, so I'm not sure who you called on. you want me to pick somebody out? They can hear me okay.
Go to Sherry first.
Okay, Mrs. Barron.
Go ahead, Steve. You were first.
Now, I was just going to thank you, Rick, for your leadership and always commitment to safety. And then thank you to the teachers for obviously the same and their leadership and programming and commitment to safety is too. It's I think everyone's on the same page. It's just obviously a challenging time, but I think thank everyone for interest. Jean, thank you for bringing up, because I did have a question about in the event that a student is on a quarantine because of the protocol, if they were going to get the academic services or programming. And Rick, I think you clarified that. I know that was a community member concern last week, and I left the meeting a little confused by that. But if somebody is out on a quarantine, they still will receive academics. So thank you for that. But the question, if you could just clarify, there's currently 1,700 students in person now, and this plan that starts in March would add 100 students at each school or in the grade levels. You could just repeat those numbers, please.
That's correct. So just to clarify, what I said is anywhere between 90 and 100 students and in grade 2, in grade 4, in grade 6, and grade 12. And in each instance, keep in mind, just pick a grade. We could talk to high school. So those high school students have a modified schedule already, as those high school parents are aware. They're also finishing up the school year a little sooner. But to your point, Steve, and to clarify, I did in fact specifically say that at each of the schools, we are adding anywhere between 90 and 100 additional students for the entire building. It just so happens to be at a specific grade level.
Thank you.
Will, you had a question?
I did, yeah, but not if Sherry was ahead of me.
Thanks, Will. First of all, I'm going to say that I wish that I had written everything down as the teachers did, because I'm going to be a little bit disorganized. I'm going to first address the teachers. I am remiss in not responding to their emails. I think it's important for them to know what the school committee has been looking at. Personally, I have had 27 emails in the last 9 days. Many of them were from people in the community. Some were from just taxpayers with no children in the community. Many of them were from parents, and a good many of them were from you. I always respond to any email that I get from a taxpayer, from a parent, and normally from teachers, until I'm kind of bombarded, and quite frankly, I can't get to all of it. So I will apologize, but I will say that I also talked to Mr. Owen and asked if everything could go through him, because I think all of us are feeling the same way. This has become an overwhelming task. It's a volunteer job. It's been overwhelming the last few months, or maybe even longer, I guess probably 10 months. On to bringing children back to school, students back to school. As a longtime educator, in fact, I was reminded the other day that I have half a century now in education, but you can do the math, and I prefer that you didn't. However, I spend a lot of my time on research, and I always have, because that's what teachers do. That's what we all do. When somebody says follow the data, I think I'll research the data because I want to see it myself. So I spend a good part of my time for months and months and months watching what is happening in education. Quite frankly, my own grandchildren are in school full-time in public school in Connecticut since September. And I've been leery of that in the beginning. But I have to say, I am no longer leery. Quite frankly, when they call and then telling me about their readathon and they're asking for their sponsorship, when they're sending pictures of dressing up as their favorite storybook character, I'm pretty impressed with what is happening, and I know it can be done. So getting back to the data, Mr. Medeiros named a lot of the data that I was going to say. However, I think we need to kind of take the fear out of it. And the best way for me to take fear out of it is preparation. I'm not someone who likes to fly in a plane, so I sit in the plane and the first thing I look for is the exit. If I go to a concert, I want to know how to get out in case of fire. So if we bring kids back to school, what exactly is going to happen? The DESE data dashboard last week reported that there were 624 students out of school across the state of Massachusetts out of 450,000, almost a half a million, 624. There were 345 staff members out of 75,000. So that kind of relaxes me a little. When I look at other data and search for other data, I found one just the other day from the BBC. It was on the BBC, and it actually said, and I'll read it to you. Give me 1 second here. Per 100,000 men aged 20 to 64, 31 of them died in the population as a whole, compared to 119 restaurant and catering staff people. Those were teachers. Breaking it down by roles, there were 18 deaths per 100,000 among men and 10 among women per 100,000. That calms me down a little. When I look at the Massachusetts clusters, this comes right off of the public health COVID-19 dashboard. Schools are not having a lot of clusters across the state. And then when I read parent emails, which some of them are the hardest of all, excuse me for a minute. And I hear, and we all hear, we've all received these. Some of them are heartbreaking on some of the situations that are happening in our homes with kids that are feeling emotionally detached. It's not a teacher's fault. It's actually a screen's fault. Anyone who was teaching back in the 90s when professional development in the early 90s, very early 90s, 1 full year of it was on technology. And that's because nobody had ever had computers in their classroom before. In fact, we didn't know very much about computers. There were 2 things that I remember so very well about our professional development. And the first thing was that we always had to teach our children to research and check out everything that you hear. Just don't believe whatever's on the computer and the internet, because anybody can place it on there. So that has kind of been a guiding light to me. The other thing that I think about almost every day is the fact that they told us, don't let kids sit in front of a computer screen. It's not good for them. And I think we all know that. In fact, it was only up until a couple of years ago that Silicon Valley schools didn't even have computers in their school. And now I hear parents who tell me that their kids are spending sometimes 10 hours a day, not all on schoolwork, but they're visiting with their friends, they're playing video games. Do I like that? No. But if you sit on a computer for X amount of hours working hard on your schoolwork, what's your release? What's the release? What do we do? It's either sit in front of a computer or sit in front of a television. Neither of those, in my mind, are very healthy for kids, and I know you would agree with me. The latest article that I just read about an hour before this meeting started was from CNBC Today, and the title of it is, as you can all look it up, was published this morning at this afternoon at 12:28. CDC director says schools can open safely without vaccinating teachers. I'm not saying don't vaccinate. I think that's a personal decision for every person. However, in the article, it says that a study from CDC published late last month found very little evidence of the virus spreading at schools in the United States and abroad when precautions are taken. Social distancing, wearing masks, and ventilating rooms. I sit here as a pretty proud school committee member with 7 others. I think our district has done a remarkable job. I think when you look at those numbers that we do get every Thursday, you think about what we are doing. So exactly how can we do anything better? And I asked Mr. Medeiros if we could have the results of the teacher survey on why they were concerned about coming back to school. Because honestly, I wanted to mitigate some of the problems, but I couldn't, there were no problems that I could see. I felt as though teachers thought we were doing okay right now. I know we're adding more kids to the school, to the classrooms. And I also listened to Mr. Medeiros and the principals. And I know we said at almost every school committee meeting, and we say we can pivot in a day. If things don't look good, we can shut down a class. We can shut down a school if it gets very bad. So I weigh all of that with, and I'm finishing up. I'm getting like Mr. Medeiros, forgive me. I weigh all of that with an article that I just read recently, a few days ago, from the JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association Pediatrics. And it was a pediatrician from Seattle who said that 5.53 million years of life could be lost as a result of school closures. Lower educational attainment is well established that people are more likely to smoke, drink heavily, more likely to suffer from heart disease, more likely to perform more hazardous work, along with other things, other reasons. And she says, if we can't send kids to school, it's going to cost lives, because not sending them to school is costing lives in the long run. So again, I say I appreciate the emails that I've received. I understand where you're coming from. I would really I'd like to see us continue on this path. I think Mr. Medeiros has been thoughtful. He has been measured. I think our bus drivers, our custodians, our nurses, I think everyone has done a phenomenal job. And it's time now to just raise the bar and see if we can just push a little bit further. And if it doesn't work out, trust me, I believe Mr. Medeiros will say it is not working out and he will pivot. Thanks so much.
Mr. Sienkiewicz.
Thank you. Thanks, Sherry, for those words. I think we all know, and I don't have to say this, that this is just such a terribly tough decision, right? I think the optimist in me thinks that we're almost we can almost see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? With the vaccines rolling out, we're almost there. But what I want to know, and I'm coming at this from the viewpoint of an educator who's working through reopening plans at my school right now currently. I would love to hear at the next school committee meeting from Dr. Jablinski, just comparing the two systems, right? Hybrid, where we're currently at, and I want to know if the quality of education that we're delivering to kids when we do a full return, if the quality of education that our teachers are giving our students when we return is worth the bang for the buck, if that makes sense, right? I know it's going to be incredibly tough with the social distancing, with masks, with the new, well, not the new guidelines, the CDC guidelines for returning, right? I know that kids returning full in person, there's going to be some transition time, which, as we know as educators, cuts into instructional time. I know that, we know that. So for me, the decision that I'm wrangling with, because it's not about student social emotional well-being. We all know that they need to be in class. We know that they need to be in school. We know that. But where I'm having a hard time wrestling with the fact is the continuity of the hybrid, which we're in right now, versus the transition of having these 100 students for the grades that you mentioned, Mr. Medeiros, come back, right? I don't know the implications and limitations of what the teachers are going to be able to do having these students come back. So I would love to hear from Dr. Jablinski, maybe at our next meeting, just a comparison between the two, kind of pros, cons, obstacles of each. I'd love to hear that. And I think there's got to be some common ground here if the numbers stay where they're at, because the bottom line is we heard loud and clear from our teachers tonight that there's some trepidation there. And I was a little bit taken back by receiving an email earlier from the superintendent saying that the vote was taken for a March 8th return, and then hearing the overwhelming opposition tonight. So something doesn't seem right to me in that aspect. I don't know, but that's where my head is at. So I would like to hear from Dr. Jablinski at the next meeting, maybe the leadership team, principals, regarding kind of the pros and cons of the two systems, limitations of each, and whether we think that the transition is going to take away from the bang from the buck that we have in the continuity of the hybrid model right now. So that's where my head is at. And I know Mr. Superintendent Rick, you've done an unbelievable job planning. And I know, like Sherry said, that if things go south, you're going to pivot in a moment's notice. But I think we need to spend a little bit more time here talking about the educational system that we'll be able to provide for our students, and the pros and cons of staying hybrid until and whenever, maybe the end of term 3, April 15th, or continuing down this track of moving more kids back in. So those are my thoughts. Thank you so much for allowing me the time to share them. I appreciate hearing the teacher voice tonight. I appreciate all the work that the superintendent has put in. This is not an easy decision for any of us. So it's important to remember that we're all in this together, and we're all going to figure it out, and we're all here for the kids. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the members? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to 7B, food service update.
In prior meetings, the school committee had asked the district's administration to look into more environmentally friendly options specific to the containers utilized in food service. The district has historically been utilizing styrofoam products for trays and plastic utensils, which is not a desirable product from an environmental perspective. Included in your packet is an analysis which shows the additional costs for both FY21 and in future fiscal years to transition to more environmentally friendly containers or trays and utensils for which the products compost into organic matter. The FY21 additional cost of $20,660 is a result of using hinged containers and wrapped cutlery that close to satisfy the additional risk during the pandemic. The FY22 proposed additional cost of $28,290 would be if the district decides to engage in this green initiative on a go-forward basis for flat trays. I am asking that the school committee consider deliberation and a possible vote to consider FY21 and continued implementation of environmentally friendly products. Similar to the athletics fee we discussed earlier, we could potentially use E&D if needed, or we may have available fund balance from this year. Potentially, we might have additional COVID funds as well that can be an FY21 resource. The other piece included in the packet shows an impact to revenue if the district would consider a price increase either currently or in the future for full price lunches from $2.75 to $3 per meal, a 25-cent price increase. Based on a review of paid lunch equity guidance from the USDA, the district's recommended price increase would be as high as 43 cents per meal based on today's current prices. I'll open up to any questions.
Any questions by the members?
Just a comment. Whatever we can do to get rid of the styrofoam, I strongly support.
So we would simply just need, and this is, Kara did a nice job of articulating. Our director, a food service director is also on board with this piece. She's actually in attendance tonight if you need to answer specific questions, but I think Kara's captured it. So it would be our recommendation that simply a motion, a second for the discussion be made tonight. We would proceed. And right after February vacation, we'd be able to put that in place.
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any discussion? Kara, just a point of, so we're saying it would be a $20,000 for the current year, and then any subsequent years, you're looking at about $28,000.
That's correct.
Any other discussion points? Ms. Ramsden?
I just had a question. I realize that it's not an option for this year, likely going into the early part of next school year, but do we still have the capability of using plastic trays and metal utensils and being able to wash those and sanitize those rather than using disposable products at all?
Andrea, would you mind responding to that, please?
Sure. So we do have the capability of doing that at Assawamsett Elementary School only. That's the only school that has a dishwasher. At all the other four schools, our staff is hand washing all the items. So at Assawamsett, we use hard plastic trays on a normal year, not this year when kids are eating in the classroom. But on a normal year, we use hard plastic trays that get washed in between lunches. We don't use metal silverware just because metal silver is it's cost prohibitive. It gets lost a lot and you have to replace it. So we do still use plastic silverware, but we use hard plastic trays at Assawamsett.
Thank you.
One other question here. What is our existing supply? Do we have existing supply to carry us through the full year, rest of this year? And if we do, what do we do with that supply?
No, we order at the high school and the middle school, we get orders twice a week, and the two elementaries get orders once a week. So we have about a week's supply on hand.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so there's no waste there, Steve. We would simply, in our next order, have that in place, use the existing and be ready to roll it out.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we will do a roll call vote to approve the switch over to the green option as outlined by the Director of Finance.
Steve Owen,
Yes.
Jean Box,
Yes.
Mary Barron,
Yes.
Jen Blum,
Yes.
Bob Clark,
Yes.
Laura Ramsden,
Yes.
Will Sankwitz,
Yes.
Steve Sylvia.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, the motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Clark, for pushing that last week.
Welcome.
Moving on to new business 7C, the 2020-2021 school calendar. A vote is required for this.
Mr. Owen, I would recommend that the committee accept the calendar as presented. The calendar as presented tonight. I'll just highlight a couple of the changes.
Yes, if you could.
So I'm requesting that the hybrid model, which is currently extended through April 2nd, be extended through the April vacation. So that's simply 2 more weeks extended, and then we can make a determination for the last 8 weeks or 9 weeks of the school year. So first aspect is simply extending the hybrid model under the current cohorts from that second, finishing on the 2nd to the 16th, which is actually a vacation day. So it's an extension of the hybrid model. The second item of significance is I'm requesting that Thursday, April 1st, which was an early release day for students, a full day for staff, be a full day for students and staff, and that Friday, April 2nd, be an early release day for students and a full day for staff with PD in the afternoon. And that would be Good Friday. So we would gain an educational day in April as opposed to an educational day in June. We would finish 1 day earlier. And as you can see the calendar, our last school day is projected to be June 16th. I certainly think the value of gaining a full school day in April compared to June outweighs the piece. It also allows families with the early release on the Friday to still extend a holiday weekend if they are doing some travels and plans and or observance there. So those are the only 2 changes in the calendar. It focused on that Thursday and Friday and the extension of the hybrid model and obviously the impact that it has as the last day of school. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but it would be my recommendation to support this calendar to be put into effect immediately.
I will entertain a motion to accept the calendar as presented.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote.
Steve Owen,
Yes.
Jean Fox,
Yes.
Mary Barron,
Yes.
Jen Blum,
Yes.
Bob Clark,
Yes.
Laura Ramsden,
Yes.
Will Sankowitz,
Yes.
Steve Sylvia.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Maderas, are we just related to calendar? Are we coming up to the point where we review the calendar for the upcoming year?
Yeah, yes, believe it or not, we actually would be typically looking at
I
that.
stuttered over that.
But what we did, Mr. Owen, like we did with the budget, really, if you think we were about 4 weeks off of our, we normally would have a budget presentation in January. We pushed it to February. I'm recommending that we at least get into the March school timeframe. So much focus is on this time, but it still, I think, allows for ample time for plans. But believe it or not, Renee's probably shaking her head if I look at her camera, because she's hard at work at that 21, 22 calendar. So you are correct. Typically that is addressed in February. I may request that we just push it out to be, hopefully have a little better handle upon where we need to be for next year.
Understood. Moving on to reports of the committee. Director of Finance, Ms. Lees.
Yes, I have 2 items to report. One in relation to our train performance contracting capital project. As an update for the report that you have in your packet, the middle school boiler, there was success on the installation of the isolation valves on January 31st, and the work for the boiler replacement is still on target for the week of February vacation. And then the second update is actually in relation to a Maya health grant. So the school district's high school nurse and nurse leader was able to recently apply and was awarded a one-time miscellaneous grant from the Massachusetts Interlocal Insurance Association due to our membership in the Health Benefits Trust, where we were awarded a one-time grant of $10,000. The grant will be used to support purchasing a total of 8 additional automated external defibrillators, otherwise known as AEDs, to be placed in each of our schools. This equipment helps with cardiac survival in the event of an emergency. We do have AEDs in each of our buildings, but some of the buildings are so large in square footage that placement of additional AEDs are critical to survival. A 3-minute response time for the AED to arrive at the victim is recommended by the American Heart Association. So the success measured by this grant is that in all 5 buildings, we would have within a 3-minute response time in any area of the building an AED installed. Maintenance of the additional AEDs will cost us an additional $1,700 more a year with our current vendor.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Lees? I think that's great news just from a overall well-being within the school. So great work on the grant and to the nurses on that. Ms. Barron.
Yes, Steve, I'm delighted that this is transpiring. It was about 2 years ago now that as a representative to the Wellness Committee, the nurses spoke about the fact that this was very much needed. And we were having trouble finding money. We talked about fundraising and so forth. So the fact that Kara was able and Paula were able to put this together and get it from COVID money from the insurance company is outstanding. Good job.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Lees? All right, seeing none, that 8B, Director of Curriculum, Dr. Kablinski.
Our Professional Development Day on January 15th addressed some of the school committee resolutions from last June on cultural diversity. Dr. Khalees Warnham presented a lively and interactive training for our staff. She was engaging, she was informative, and she provided the staff with a broad range of ideas and topics to think about regarding cultural diversity and the lens that we look at our students through and getting to know our students. So that was very well received. Our spring semester of TECA is up and running. All students have been enrolled and courses began on January 27th. And our TECA enrollment coordinators and myself will continue to monitor this program, the progress of our students, and we'll work with TECA to troubleshoot any issues that come up. So far, it's been pretty smooth. And then DESE, the Department of elementary and secondary education issued the district report cards for 2020. And usually that includes our MCAS data, but because of COVID last year, we did not take the MCAS tests. But it still has demographic information. Schools are expected to report out and to provide those report cards to all the families. We have also posted a link to our Freetown-Lakeville School District website under the Curriculum and Assessment tab with links for each individual school on what their report card is. So that's been posted.
Thank you, Dr. Moon. Any questions for Dr. Kablinski? I just had one question on the DESE reports. I know in past years, we were, I'll say flagged for lack of a better word, related to our attendance. It appears we knocked it out of the park because I think we had to do some recategorizations of that. Is last year an anomaly because of the COVID year, or did we do some work to really straighten that out?
I think a lot of the schools did work to straighten that out. It was concerted effort by the administrative team. It was a topic of discussion, and I think they did knock it out of the park.
Okay.
But Pat's completely correct, Steve, if I may, but just to add this, that DESE did shut down that attendance reporting as we got into the pandemic because of the necessary adjustments. So it calculated on everything up until that time frame, and that's what's reflected. And Pat's correct. The schools had done a tremendous job, but obviously things are being adjusted relative to attendance this year for obvious reasons.
Got it.
Yeah, they are requesting and that we provide remote learning attendance also, which the schools have taken into consideration and done a very good job of coming up with a system for that. So we will have to report that out. DESE is looking for that information moving forward.
Correct.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Kablinski? All right, 8C, Director of Student Services, Ms. Curlin.
Good evening. The department has some good news this evening. We have contracted with school psychologist services, additional contracted hours starting last week. So we have Ann Holt joining us. She's a retired school psychologist, joining in our independent contractor, Susan Clancy, for evaluations at Grace and the high school. We also have the benefit of Betty Lofelm available to assist when she returns to the area sometime in the spring. So our numbers are looking are very good now with this additional support. Very happy that we have solved that issue currently. Yeah, we have also started planning for our extended school year, although we just had snow. We start in February, getting our job descriptions and our posting ready for hiring staff. And then we do our student list and student assignments. The program this year is scheduled to run July 6th, which is a Tuesday following the Monday holiday, through August 5th. We expect an in-person educational model of instruction at this time. This has been a topic of discussion at our DESE meetings, and we are awaiting further guidance from them as to further requirements or expectations regarding extended school year instruction. Lastly, in special ed update, we continue to work with the business department on refining our fiscal year 22 special ed budget, and that is ongoing. We have one DESE update, the dyslexia law that was passed a while back now. The Massachusetts dyslexia screening law regulations will be out sometime in March. That's anticipated. And the purpose of that is addressing screening procedures for early identification of specific learning disabilities in reading based on that new law. Under family engagement and CPAC, the next CPAC meeting will be held on March 16th at 6:30. Also scheduled to be virtual at this time, but more information will be posted as it is and advertised if we will have a Zoom. Finally, we have our out-of-district enrollment census, which has been consistent since the start of the school year. No new information to report there.
Any questions for Ms. Curlin? Just one question related to the special ed transportation, especially in FY22. I know we have outsourced a number of that, and I know we're in the process of bringing some of that back. How does that look in FY22? Are we bringing more of that, of some of the outsourced vans to that, or is it consistent to what we're doing this year?
So I think that was what the bid process was for, to gain information on pricing and routes to see what was feasible to bring back within the guidelines and resources that we have.
Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Curlin? Thank you very much. Moving on to subcommittee updates, 9A Regional Finance Committee. We do have a meeting scheduled for next Wednesday, February 10th. In light of timelines and postings, we should proceed with a remote meeting for next Wednesday. Just because, as we know today, it's the governor still has the restrictions in place, and I know we've heard that it may change on Monday, but we should still proceed for next Wednesday being a remote meeting until we hear in our follow-on meeting after that, we can change back to in person. Superintendent's Evaluation Committee.
That's on me, and I failed, so I'm on it tonight.
Well, Mr. Clark will be holding detention, so you can participate there.
I will.
Any other business maybe properly come before the meeting? Mr. Clark.
Yeah, I would just ask the superintendent and food services to start thinking about possibly the feasibility of a senior breakfast for senior citizens, maybe in the spring. Hopefully they'll have vaccinations, and it's their choice whether to come or not. But I don't want to think that they think that we've forgotten them or swept them under the rug or something like that. So maybe sometime in April or something, just a tentative date that we could do that.
Mr. Clark, I certainly will keep that option open. I have concerns under the current circumstances, but we certainly won't have enough time to plan and organize something if things progress and improve.
Thank you.
All right, we have some upcoming dates on the calendar. Regional FinCom next Wednesday. We have school vacation week, the week of February 15th. And then our next school committee meeting is February 24th at 6:30. Stay tuned as far as the format based upon the state restrictions for that. I'll open the floor to anything else from the members. Questions, comments? Seeing none, it is 8:33. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion, and I have a second. We do a roll call vote?
Steve Owen,
Yes.
Jean Fox,
Yes.
Sherry Barron,
Yes.
Jen Blum,
Yes.
Bob Clark,
Yes.
Laura Ramsden,
Yes.
Will Sankowitz,
Yes.
Steve Sylvia.
Yes.
All right, the motion passes. Thank you, everybody. And,